I'm Chris Wallace. The federal government partially shuts down as a
shutdown is all yours.
We will not be blackmailed because Republicans are unwilling to compromise.
They believe that the issue of illegal immigration is more important than everything else.
Still a Schumer shutdown. So it's got that nice little ring to it, doesn't it?
Partisan finger-pointing and uncertainty after a standoff in the Senate over immigration. We'll discuss the fallout for Americans and who will get the blame with White House Budget Director Mick Mulvaney and Democratic Senator Chris Coons, part of the bipartisan group trying to work out a compromise. Plus,
I, Donald John Trump, do solemnly swear.
We'll ask our Sunday panel about the Trump presidency 1 year after his inauguration.
Task Force Dagger.
And our Power Player of the Week, the story behind the first combat teams on the ground after the September 11th attacks. How soon after 9/11 did you know you were going to war?
I knew the minute the second airplane hit the second tower.
All right now on Fox News Sunday. And hello again from Fox News in Washington. Congress is still here this weekend, still trying to reach a deal to reopen the government after the clock ran out on funding midnight Friday. The shutdown coinciding with the one-year anniversary of the Trump presidency. The president canceled a trip to Florida to stay in Washington until they reach a compromise. This hour, we'll discuss the way forward with White House Budget Chief Mick Mulvaney and Democratic Senator Chris Coons, part of a small group trying to make a deal. But first, let's bring in Chief Congressional Correspondent Mike Emanuel live on Capitol Hill with the latest. Mike.
Well, Chris, there are no visible signs of progress in ending this government shutdown. In fact, things have gotten pretty personal with the Senate Majority Leader blasting his counterpart, Chuck Schumer.
The president would not give him everything he wants on the issue of illegal immigration in one afternoon in the Oval Office.
Republicans were quick to brand it the Schumer shutdown after Senate Democrats blocked a 4-week government funding extension late Friday night. It also would have provided a 6-year extension of health insurance to an estimated 9 million children. Democrats held out for a deal on the so-called Dreamers, young people brought to this country illegally by their parents, and now sound like they're adding to their demands.
At this point, we feel very, very strongly about the issues, not just Dreamers, but opioids, pensions, not funding the military on a CR basis, and we feel the American people are on our side.
This shutdown of
House lawmakers sound aggravated after they passed the government funding extension and it was rejected by Senate Democrats. That led to this dust-up on the House floor, taking aim at Schumer.
A majority in the House and a majority in the Senate have voted to prevent this shutdown and keep the government open.
Bring the poster to the chair for his observation.
Soon this shutdown will get real if by Monday morning there is no deal and much of the federal workforce is on furlough. Chris?
Not good if they're arguing over posters. Mike Emanuel reporting from Capitol Hill. Mike, thank you. Joining me now, the White House Budget Chief Mick Mulvaney, the man in charge of implementing the government shutdown. Director, welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
Good morning. Thank you again for having me.
Describe the extent of the shutdown, both in terms of personnel and programs.
Sure. As of yesterday, federal agencies started sending out their furlough notices. There's really 3 categories of employees: those who will come to work on Monday, those who will not come to work on Monday, and there's actually a smaller group that will come to work on Monday for about 4 hours to help shut things down, and then they'll leave as well. Those notices went out yesterday. And then over the course of the next couple of days, we'll start to see agencies try and implement their shutdown plans, which is going to be different, Chris, than it was in 2013 as we try and work to keep more agencies open. In fact, I talked to the president late, I guess it was Friday night, and he said, look, Mick, we need to work hard to keep as many of these folks at work and keep as many of these agencies open as we can. So that's the shutdown plan that we're implementing right now.
Where will we see the effects first? Regular Americans see the effects, and where will we see the biggest effects?
The effects actually won't be as visible as they were in 2013. Keep in mind, in 2013, the only way I can describe it is the Obama administration chose to weaponize the shutdown. They wanted to be very showy. They went out of their way to make it hurt more people and to be more visible. You remember maybe the barricades up in front of the World War II memorial to keep the vets away from their own memorial. You won't see that this year. The national parks will be open. The trash won't get picked up, but they'll still be available.
I mean, if you're talking about furloughing 800,000 people.
It hurts, but you asked me a question, is what will people see? And the point of the matter is, if you work there, you will see a dramatic difference, but most Americans won't see a difference. You go to the airport on Monday, the TSA will still be there. The military is still at work. Now, they're not getting paid, and that's wrong, but in terms of what you will see, it will not be as dramatic as you saw in 2013.
Let's talk about how we get out of this mess. There are new reports that Senate Republicans are going to offer a deal, a 3-week CR, not a 4-week CR, which would last continuing resolution until February 8th, with disaster relief funding and also money for CHIP, the Children's Health Insurance. Is that true? And what about DACA?
I'm not a couple different things. I'm not familiar with the specific deal. I know it's on the table right now, which is the 4-week. I have heard what you've just mentioned about the 3 weeks. I know there is a separate disaster supplemental funding bill sitting over in the Senate. I've not heard about those two things getting married together. You may want to ask Senator Coons about that. But the fact of the matter is, we probably need at least those 3 weeks to try and negotiate DACA. Let's be clear. The president wants to resolve DACA. He could have taken it away entirely 6 months ago and chose to give Congress this 6 months that expires the first week of March to fix it. Unfortunately, Congress is waiting up to the very last day to do that, but we are very interested in getting DACA worked out.
You are calling this, we heard it, saw it in the opening, the Schumer shutdown. But the fact is, you only had 46 Republicans willing to vote for this continuing resolution. So even if there hadn't been a Democratic filibuster, you didn't have the majority needed to pass the CR. All the more reason, isn't this on Republicans in the White House and control of the House and the Senate?
You want an interesting word there, majority. They actually got the majority. This sheds light on one of the difficulties we face in Washington.
It did because of Democrats.
Well, but you got a majority. You just didn't get the 60 votes.
But the point is, you do not have your own House in order. True. You only have 46 Republicans supporting this.
If you had 9 or 10 or 12 Democrats, where are the Democrats, Chris, who say back home that they want to work in a bipartisan fashion, they want to work with Republicans, they want to reach across the aisle? Where were those folks last week? Only 5 Democrats voted for a bill that they like. Let's not lose sight of that. The Democrats have voted. They like the CHIP program. They have voted. They like delaying the Obamacare Cadillac tax program. They like funding the government. They always have. They do not oppose the bill. This is pure politics on their part. Where are the Democrats who say one thing back home and do another? That's what we're focusing on.
But you only had 46 Republicans.
And again, if you had 10 or 15 Democrats and it still failed, I think your point is fair. But right now, until you have at least 9 Democrats, we cannot open the government.
Well, you don't have 46 Republicans either. I mean, you don't have 51 Republicans either.
Right, but again, short of 9, what difference does it make? Without 9 Democrats, this government is not opening.
Back in 2013, when Republicans insisted on shutting down the government because they wanted to remove all funding of Obamacare, and they did it for 16 days, private citizen Trump placed the responsibility squarely. Here he is.
Problems start from the top, and they have to get solved from the top, and the president's the leader, and he's got to get everybody in a room, and he's got to lead.
Question, if President Obama was responsible then, get everybody in the room and lead, isn't President Trump responsible now?
Yeah, a couple of different things. Actually, the shutdown in 2016 was not about getting rid of Obamacare. 2013, excuse me. It was about delaying the individual mandate, which we just got rid of on the tax deal. But compare 2013 and 2016 and how the two presidents have acted. I went through the middle of 2013. I think I was on your show during that shutdown, and I will look you in the eye and tell you that President Obama wanted that shutdown. And he wanted to weaponize it. He wanted to use it politically to hurt Republicans because he thought Republicans would get blamed politically. And he wanted that shutdown. This president has worked really, really hard to prevent the shutdown. We had folks down to the White House several times over the last couple of days. I think Mr. Schumer was there as recently as the last day before the shutdown. He's actively engaged yesterday, calling people, trying to get the government open.
Well, why doesn't he? I mean, he didn't have a meeting, a bipartisan leader with congressional leaders yesterday. Does he have one on the schedule for today?
Because he had one on Thursday, but not yesterday. I mean, we could split hairs on that all the time. The president.
Well, the shutdown happened on Friday night.
But we knew it was also coming. We had a bipartisan meeting with senators several times. In fact, I think we had several of those meetings leading into the shutdown. This president, I don't think anybody could say that this president wants this shutdown. You could not say the same thing about President Obama. In fact, I think he actually did want it.
You blame Democrats for holding the government hostage now. But back in 2013, you supported holding the government hostage on this question of Obamacare. Take a look.
We believe that what we did was right. We did it for the right reasons. We did it for these kids here. They might not recognize that right now, but we really do believe that this was worth having the fight.
Why was that legitimate then? The right reason to have a fight, but it's not legitimate now.
It's a fair question, but here's the answer. They were asking us to vote for something in 2013 that we didn't like. In fact, that we had a principled opposition to. They were asking us to vote to fund Obamacare, something that was very difficult for Republicans to do, and we wouldn't vote for it. Let me finish.
I wasn't saying a word.
Here we are today. This is a bill that Democrats support. They're opposing a bill that they don't oppose in order to make a political point. That's a significant difference, Chris.
I think that's a debating point. The fact is, there are budgetary implications to DACA. I mean, if you're going to deport 800,000 people, that's going to cost money. You shut down the government in 2013, you writ large, Republicans, because you didn't like Obamacare. You wanted to shut down the government again in 2015 because you didn't like Planned Parenthood. They are willing to shut down the government because they want a solution to DACA. You can say, well, one thing is what's in the bill, one thing is what's not in the bill. The point is that both you then and them now are willing to shut down the government because they support or oppose a policy. Same issue.
You go back, you look at 2013, 2015, we could have a long discussion about it another day, but there were many, many times the House actually voted to open the government. We voted many times on many different packages that would have opened the government. In fact, I remember voting for stuff that I didn't like very much so that the government could open. And it was a breakdown in the Senate at that time that under Harry Reid that prevented the government from opening. So I do think there's a major difference between now and 2013. But importantly, the deal that's on the table right now in the Senate is the type of deal that would have worked in 2013 and would have worked, in fact, did work in 2013 and 2015. It's a bipartisan measure. The bill that the House passed is the old-fashioned, typical bipartisan bill that does keep the government open. But for some reason, the dysfunction, specifically with the Senate and Democrats, is so dramatic now it's not working. It's almost as if they're so beholden to their left wing that they can't give the president even a victory on keeping the government open.
I want to take you, because I want to talk about victories, I want to take you back to the big meeting that was held on Friday in the White House between President Trump and Chuck Schumer. Senate Democratic sources tell me this. Let's put it up on the screen. Schumer raised full funding of a wall, more than $18 billion, and a full increase in defense spending, around $80 billion. But they say that White House Chief of Staff John Kelly later called back and said to Schumer that it was, quote, too liberal. Is that true?
Yeah, is there a chance can you put that list back up? Because I can respond to each of those in turn.
Well, we can remember it, but
okay.
Go ahead.
So full funding. Full funding. Full funding for the wall. No. What Mr. Schumer offered the president was an authorization for funding, not an appropriation. I know that's deep down in the weeds for folks who don't live in Washington, D.C., but the difference between authorization and appropriation is like night and day. There is already authorization to build a wall on the southern border that Chuck Schumer voted for in 2006. Hasn't been built because the money was never appropriated, was never funded. And that's the same deal that Chuck Schumer offered on Saturday.
Let's focus on that, because I think that's important. Yesterday, you went after Schumer hard on this issue. Take a look.
Chuck Schumer actually had the gall to look at the president and said, I'm giving you everything you asked for the wall, and then when pressed, admitted that he wasn't doing it. That's the type of negotiation that Mr. Schumer has been engaged in with the president. And you have to ask yourself at one point, does it even become profitable to continue to work with somebody like that?
Now, this is to get complicated because you've raised a new issue here. Schumer's staff says, and specifically in response to that you're not telling the truth. They say that he offered not 1 year's funding, which was what was suggested yesterday, but full funding, $18 to $20 billion in year one, that they were going to put that on the table, not offer. I should say that they were willing to discuss that, and that you guys walked away from that. I mean, if you got full funding for the wall, that would be the deal of the century. Why not take yes for an answer?
It would be the deal of the century because that was not the offer. The author, again, I don't want to split hairs.
No, I understand the difference between authorization and appropriation.
Ask Mr. Schumer's office if they offered to appropriate $20 billion. Go to the next thing that was on your list, by the way, about full funding for defense. Not true. He was offering something that was in the budget request from FY18. I know because I happen to write that budget. What the request is right now, and the discussion is about the NDAA levels, which is slightly higher, and that Mr. Schumer not only voted for, but is taking credit for back home for fully funding the military. He won't give the president that higher figure. He gives him a lower figure as part of the negotiation.
play a role as a negotiator here, but let me do it just for a moment. Sure. If Senator Schumer comes back and says, no, I'm not talking about authorization, I'm talking about appropriation, $18 to $20 billion right now, you can build your wall. And there are more Democrats saying that, including Congressman Gutierrez. Would the president accept that, and would you make a deal?
And again, I'm not going to negotiate with you either, but let's go back to what the request was at the very beginning, that we were happy to talk about DACA, want to resolve DACA. What does part of a DACA deal look like from the administration's perspective? Number one, the southern border defense, the southern border security gets fully funded. That means the wall, that means the $20 billion. We also deal with chain migration, we deal with a visa lottery system, and we deal with interior enforcement.
You seem to be suggesting that even if you got the $20 billion, that wouldn't be enough.
Well, again, those are the four things, the four principles we've asked for in the discussion. Mr. Schumer comes in and offers us none of that. That's not the basis for an agreement.
But final question in that regard. If you got the $20 billion, would you make the deal?
Again, I'm not going to negotiate on behalf of the president. That would certainly cover one of the four things we've asked for.
Final question. This is NFL championship weekend. Over, under. How long is this going to last?
A couple different things. I think two different answers. I think there's a chance it gets solved before Monday. I really do believe that at heart here there was an interest by some folks in the Democrat Party to deny the president sort of the victory lap of the anniversary of his inauguration, the chance to talk about the success with the tax bill, success with the economy and jobs. And I think if they get over that, there's a chance this thing gets done before 9 o'clock on Monday morning when folks are come to work.
And if not?
If that doesn't happen, it could go several days, because I think there's other Democrats who want to see the president give the State of the Union during a shutdown.
Well, that is more than several days. That's January 30th.
It's 9 or 10 days, yeah.
It could go that long.
Well, you have to ask the Senate Democrats, Chris.
To break the stalemate in Congress and end the shutdown. Republicans, including President Trump, say Democrats are holding the government hostage over their demands for Dreamers, the young immigrants brought to this country as children who face possible deportation when their protection runs out in March. Joining us now, Democratic Senator Chris Coons, who's part of a bipartisan group trying to find a way out of the shutdown. Senator, welcome back to Fox News Sunday.
Thanks, Chris. Good morning.
Well, let's start with the president's tweets. He has sent one this morning. Put it up on the screen. Great to see how hard Republicans are fighting for our military and safety at the border. The Dems just want illegal immigrants to pour into our nation unchecked. If stalemate continues, Republicans should go to 51% nuclear option and vote on real long-term budget, no CRs, continuing resolutions. Your reaction to that?
Well, Chris, this is another example of President Trump throwing a tweet in the middle of bipartisan negotiations that are making progress. I think Senator McConnell, the Republican majority leader, in the end will have much more to say about how the Senate is run than the president should. I think in the last segment you ran a clip from then private sector leader Donald Trump in 2013, who said during a shutdown the president should lead. It's the president's responsibility. And I think he should, instead of throwing tweets from the White House, pull together the four leaders of the House and the Senate on a bipartisan basis today and negotiate. I spent all day yesterday not going to the floor, not going on cable news, not denouncing Republicans, but meeting with them, listening to them, with a small group that grew and grew. And by the end of the day, we had 20 Republican and Democratic senators listening to each other, trying to not just get out of this shutdown, but address and fix some of the underlying problems that have left us with so many unaddressed priorities that have stacked up over the last couple of months. And well, I'm hopeful we can get through this.
Let's talk about meetings, because they had a meeting, the president and Chuck Schumer, on Friday, and it ended up maybe making things worse, not better. And I want to ask you about a point that I pressed with Director Mulvaney. Did Schumer put on the table $20 billion full funding for the wall in year one, not over installments? And if so, to Mulvaney's point, was it an authorization or was it real money, an appropriation?
Well, I wasn't in the meeting, and I don't know exactly. But from talking to Leader Schumer, my impression is, reluctantly, he offered the two things the president really wanted: full funding of the military and full funding to build the wall, or the wall system. We're never really going to build a 2,000-mile concrete wall.
But you're saying it wasn't an authorization, it was an appropriation. He was willing to say, real money, we'll give you the money to build the wall.
Well, I think he had to explain that difference to the president about full appropriation year one versus authorization and a commitment to appropriation. But the reality was the president campaigned on full funding for the military and a border wall, and said, remember, 2 weeks ago, the president brought in a bipartisan group and said, I want to solve this. I want us to have a DACA deal. I think he called it a bill of love, and put out a menu and said, we need a bipartisan solution. I'll take the heat. You all come back here on Thursday, present me with a solution. 6 senators, Republican and Democrat, came back on Thursday, presented a bipartisan solution, and he fairly famously blew it up in an expletive-laden exchange with senators. So at the end of the day, part of our challenge here is negotiating with a president who struggles to hear yes. I believe Senator Schumer on Friday put a lot on the table, and the president accepted it. And then 2 hours later, after hearing from folks who oppose any reasonable resolution to this DACA challenge, he walked it back. So I have a lot of sympathy for Senator Mitch McConnell, the leader of the Republican caucus, who said on the floor Friday night, how am I supposed to negotiate on this issue when we still don't know what President Trump will really accept?
Let me ask you, though. Apparently, what Republicans are going to offer, what Mitch McConnell is going to offer today or tonight or at 1 a.m. tomorrow morning, is a 3-week continuing resolution, not 4 weeks to February 16th, 3 weeks to February 8th, during which time you can negotiate DACA. Why not accept that?
Well, I'm not going to negotiate for our leadership. It is my hope that we will have an agreement that all of our unfinished business, disaster relief, opioid funding, coming to an agreement on budget caps that will fully fund the military and our domestic priorities, and addressing DACA, that all of this will be negotiated in good faith over the next, let's say, 3 weeks and voted on. That we will have a date certain for a vote to move forward.
So so in DACA, is that the point, is that you want a commitment, a guarantee of a specific date for a vote, not just we'll agree to talk to you about DACA over the next 3 weeks?
Well, let's play tape here on what happened Friday night, where you've got Senator McConnell on the floor saying, there's no rush, there's no hurry, we don't need to be addressing this, this is an unrelated issue. For me, it would be a big step forward to have the majority leader say, this is an urgent issue, it's on the list of things that we must address, and we will vote on the Senate. If we can't get clarity from the president about what he will embrace, then the Senate will be the Senate, and we will move forward. I think that would be a good step forward.
Democrats like to say when Republicans shut down the government that real people are going to get hurt. Here is Secretary of Defense James Mattis on the real effect of this shutdown.
I would just tell you that we do a lot of intelligence operations around the world, and they cost money. Those obviously would stop.
As a member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, Senator, are you willing to see that and other vital programs shut down?
The government should not be shut down. That's why I spent all day yesterday listening to, working with Republicans and Democrats.
You voted to shut it down. You voted against the CR.
I voted against a 30-day CR. And to be clear, on Friday, an assistant to that Secretary of Defense, Secretary Mattis, put out a statement saying we shouldn't have another 30-day CR. That's why there were Republicans and Democrats who voted on Friday against a 30-day CR.
So a 3-week CR you're going to go for?
It depends on what's on the table in terms of what we're going to move forward on. What matters less is 30-day, 25-day, 20-day, although we've spent a lot of time on that. What matters more is ending the hostage-taking and moving forward. I've got tens of thousands of Delawareans who depend on community health centers. We're months overdue in addressing that. I've got tens of thousands of families relying on the community health insurance program, the children's health insurance program. Remember those hurricanes that tore through Texas and Puerto Rico and Florida? We haven't funded the relief for those hurricanes. Remember the opioid crisis? We have this long list of homework unfinished. We need to address them.
I want to pick up on this, though, because you just said, boy, we don't want the hostage-taking that's going on. That's exactly what Democrats said back in 2013 when Republicans shut down the government over Obamacare. Take a look.
I call them legislative arsonists. They're there to burn down what we should be building up.
Someone goes into your house, takes your wife and children hostage, and then says, let's negotiate over the price of your house. We could say, we're shutting down the government. We're not going to raise the debt ceiling until you pass immigration reform. It would be governmental chaos.
Senator, right now, aren't you the legislative arsonist? Aren't you right now taking the government hostage?
Well, Chris, just because a bipartisan group of Democrats and Republicans voted Friday night, including me, against a 30-day CR, doesn't mean I'm an arsonist. I supported
but you say now that you would,
the government. I supported
you say you wouldn't
open.
support a 3-week CR either unless there's certain conditions met.
Right.
I mean, it's the same point. They shut down the government because they didn't like Obamacare. You're shutting down the government because there are certain things you're insisting on.
Right. And notice I'm spending very little time pointing fingers and saying it's Trump's fault versus it's this person's fault. That's not my priority. My priority, Chris, is finding a way forward through this. I'm more optimistic after yesterday than I've been in a long time because we had 20 senators in a room, Republicans and Democrats listening to each other, talking not just about how to get through this issue, but how to get back to an appropriations process that works. I'm the senior Democrat on the subcommittee that funds Mick Mulvaney's OMB office, including the whole federal judiciary, the Department of the Treasury, all federal properties. We never even had our final markup in October. We're 4 months into the new fiscal year. Our appropriations process is badly broken. And if there was anything good that came out of this weekend when everybody had to cancel their plans and stay here, it's that we are listening to each other and trying to find a way forward. I call on President Trump to do the same, be the leader that millions of Americans hoped he would be, a real deal maker, hear yes, pull together a bipartisan group today, and negotiate to a conclusion. I'll remind you, it's partly because of that explosive meeting where he rejected a bipartisan solution on border security and Dreamers that we're in this mess.
Well,
there is a solution.
We can argue about his language, but the fact is, though, he didn't like the deal.
That's correct. He rejected it in famously forceful language.
But I guess here's my question, because I can't. I pressed Director Mulvaney. Let me press you. What is the bottom line? What do you have to reopen the government?
A commitment to move forward on all of these issues that we've been talking about: community health centers, dealing with disaster relief, children's health insurance program,
to move forward
and
means
Dreamers.
What?
Votes, that we're going to have votes, that we're not going to say this isn't an issue, we don't need to deal with it. Look, I've got teenagers. It's like Dad comes home at 8 and says, how you doing on your homework? Almost done, making progress. 9 o'clock, how you doing? Do you need help? Almost making progress. 10 o'clock, how are we doing on the homework? It's bedtime. What's the urgency? It's not due until tomorrow. We need a recognition that it's overdue. We've got a list of things we need to move forward on.
I used to just say the dog ate my homework. Senator Coons, thank you. Thanks for coming in today. Always good to talk with you, and good luck in working out a deal.
Go Eagles.
Go Eagles? Oh, that's right. You're from Delaware. I guess that's close enough. You've now ticked off about 90% of the country. Up next, we'll bring in our Sunday group to discuss how long this shutdown will last and who will pay the political price.
The votes were there. The president was ready. The solution to this manufactured crisis was inches away.
Negotiating with this White House is like negotiating with Jell-O. It's next to impossible. As soon as you take one step forward, the hard right forces the president 3 steps back.
Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and Democratic Leader Chuck Schumer exchanging blame Saturday for shutting down the government. And it's time now for our Sunday group, the head of Heritage Action for America, Michael Needham, Charles Lane of the Washington Post, former Democratic Congresswoman Jane Harman, director of the Woodrow Wilson Center, and Josh Holmes, Mitch McConnell's former chief of staff and now a GOP strategist. As we just said, Josh, you're close to Senator McConnell. What is the state of play right now on the Senate floor in terms of ending this shutdown?
Well, I think the state of play is Democrats are now in a situation where they've walked themselves into a boxed canyon. And frankly, there's no way out other than figuring out how to pass what's currently on the floor. And they've got a vote that's currently scheduled for 1 a.m., which is
1 a.m. Monday morning.
Right, which is, again, entirely unnecessary. But basically what it would do is just keep the government open with the same criteria that we talked about on Friday night. You're funding, full funding of the military, full funding of S-CHIP, full funding of all government operations, and then get to the business of negotiating the issue of DACA, which is the reason for this shutdown in the first place. It can be done at any moment. All of this was, I think, irresponsible, but also unnecessary.
President Trump said this week that what Democrats are really trying to do is to distract from all the good economic news. Here he is.
The Democrats want to see a shutdown to get off this subject because this subject is not working for them. The tax cuts and tax reform has not been working well for the Democrats.
Congresswoman Harman, Are you comfortable with where Democrats are right now, holding out for either a DACA fix or a commitment for a specific date for a vote on DACA? And do you think they have a strategy for if this shutdown goes on?
Well, first of all, shutting the government is a live fire exercise. Real people get hurt. There are 36 furloughed employees at the Wilson Center alone, but military training doesn't happen. Our ships are colliding. I mean, this is a serious problem, and the government should open now, hopefully tonight. I think the time that's gone into polling and messaging should have been spent on making a deal, and I understand that as of last night, at least 19 senators, and I just asked Senator Coons as he was walking out, have been working together on a bipartisan basis to fix this, and what they're looking for is an improved deal with a 3-week term limit, right, but at the end of that, guaranteed votes on things like DACA, a DACA fix, which 87% of the country supports and most members of Congress support. So
you're comfortable with them shutting the government down until they get that?
No, I'm not comfortable with anyone shutting the government down. I'm not comfortable, but I'm hopeful that 20-plus bipartisan members of the Senate will today craft something beyond what was offered on Friday, that a minority of people, not 51 Republicans, supported, as you pointed out in your interview. I'm comfortable that hopefully there will be an improved package that will get voted on today or at 1 o'clock in the morning, God save us, that will guarantee votes on all the things that should be part of this package that could have been worked out without shutting the government down.
Michael, back in 2013, when Republicans shut down the government over Obamacare, their favorability ratings tanked. And yet, when you got to the midterm election in 2014, they won a big victory and they actually took back the Senate. Do you think, to a certain degree, Democrats are pursuing the same strategy, which is we can galvanize our base, we can play to the left wing of our party right now, and by next November, months from now, everybody will forget about the shutdown?
Yeah, I think what the 2013 shutdown did was it clarified where the two parties were on an important policy issue. And these things actually are about policy. There was one party against Obamacare. There was one that was in favor of keeping it. What this debate is about, it's not even just about DACA. I mean, the president has said he wants a solution on DACA. The Democrats allegedly have said that they'll give funding for the border. What this is actually about is chain migration. What that means is, can the people who are currently here illegal bring not just their close relatives, their distant relatives into this country? When we bring somebody into this country, do we choose them based on merit, or do we say you can go bring a cousin with you? And so this is a shutdown over whether or not we should give amnesty to illegal immigrants who are here and have chain migration allow them to bring distant relatives. That's not going to work out well in November if they're the party that says we're the party in favor of amnesty and distant relatives.
You're sliding over something, which is, I think there's really been
claiming that they're in favor of the border.
And you don't think, I mean, the president's main promise was not chain migration. His main promise was build the wall. If he gets that, he shouldn't take yes for an answer.
The president's been very clear from the very start, when he first said we'll have a 6-month reprieve on DACA, that one of the things that he wants is an end to chain migration. And from a policy perspective, he's exactly right about that. We should have a system that allows people generously into America who can provide merit, who can do it the same way Canada does it, Australia does it. Instead, we have this crazy system where people are allowed to bring distant relatives like cousins into the country, and that is the issue that Democrats are shutting the government over.
Chuck, which side do you think is in more political jeopardy now, and which leads to the question, how do you see this ending?
Well, I think the Democrats have a broadly popular goal, which is DACA, relief for those kids, and they're using a risky to unpopular tactic in the pursuit of it, which is the government shutdown. And so I think the longer it goes on, the more time the Republicans could have to start saying, hey, wait a minute, you know, they're putting too much at risk in the pursuit of what we all agree is a laudable goal. Having said that, look, the Republicans do control all the levers of the government, and the Democrats have a strong argument that says in that situation it shouldn't shut down. What's kind of going on here, and I think some other people on the panel have already touched on this, both parties are only addressing these arguments at their bases. They are not anymore contesting over some middle ground of undecided people who are persuadable on this. And so in a way, it's already a stalemate, and it's going to just perpetuate as a stalemate, which makes it only crazier that we're going to let it go on at all.
Let me push you on that just for a second. I think Democrats, that's absolutely true. With Republicans, that is not the case at all in the context of this discussion. All they want to do is keep the government open and fund S-chip. It's really clear what the discussion is about the government shutdown. It has nothing to do with DACA policy.
We are going to have to take a break here. Well, I have a feeling, well, I hope we don't have to discuss this next week, but we may. Up next, this weekend marks 1 year since President Trump took the oath of office. What has he done right? What has he done wrong? Plus, what would you like to ask the panel about the president's first year? Just go to Facebook or Twitter at Fox News Sunday, and we may use your question on the air.
2017 was a year of tremendous achievement, monumental achievement, actually. I don't think any administration has done what we've done and what we've accomplished in its first year.
President Trump showing his characteristic gift for salesmanship as he celebrates his first year in office. We're back now with the panel. Michael, how do you rate President Trump's first year?
Well, it has been a very successful year when you look at what the White House can do without Congress. And obviously the Congress has at various times been more dysfunctional. But you had a huge tax cut with Mitch McConnell. The Senate, the House deserve big credit for the role that they played in helping that get across the finish line. You have a great regulatory rollback. I think we finally have an American foreign policy that's confidently pushing itself abroad. I would say it's been a conventional conservative year of successes, and part of what got Trump elected was reaching out to new audiences, finding ways to appeal to some issues, some anxieties that are out there that I don't know from a policy agenda we fully captured yet. I think when you look at something like Apprenticeship Week, which the President, the White House did earlier this year, that's a theme. That's one of the types of issues that will reach out to some of those new Trump voters. I think we have to find ways to have more policy victories on those types of issues also.
Chuck, I think it's fair to say you are often critical of this president, but take a look at this list. A big surge in GDP, a big drop in unemployment, record highs in the stock market. We're seeing them now breaking through the 1,000 mark every 7-8 days, a record list of conservative appointments to the court, and a big rollback of ISIS. I understand that you don't agree with some of the policies, but would you agree that this has been a consequential and perhaps a successful first year for this president?
Yes. I think, in fact, I was preparing to acknowledge that on his terms and on the Republican Party's terms, you have to give credit where credit is due. They have achieved a number of their goals, and you just spared me the work of listing them. But the presidency is both a policy-making job and a statesmanship job, a national embodiment job, a symbolism job. And on that latter part, on the part that revolves around character and temperament and bringing the country together and modeling behavior, this has been a disastrous year. And I would go to issues such as the remarks he made after Charlottesville, the comment, the unprintable comment he made just a couple of days ago, all the tweets. In terms of the part of the presidency that involves representing the country and modeling the kind of behavior that George...
On Facebook from Tamara Highland, she writes, will Trump ever get a modicum of respect for some of the good things he has done? Economy, taxes, unemployment, ISIS. Josh, how do you answer Tamara, and given the fact that the president's personal approval ratings lag so far behind, for instance, satisfaction with the economy, is part of the problem, the style points that Chuck was just talking about, that in a sense he steps on his own success?
I think that's exactly right, and I think Chuck actually laid it out pretty well. There's an issue of trying to take a look at this presidency from kind of two silos. One is, what are the accomplishments? And in that category, he's gotten an awful lot done. I mean, generational tax reform alone is pretty big. Supreme Court, all the judges and regulatory rollbacks that Mike talked about, huge. Stylistically, on the other hand, there's an awful lot of Americans that have a big problem with it. Where that runs into is that most people can't make a fair evaluation of the substance of the argument because they can't get around what his style is. And so I think that's the burden that this administration has in getting a fair report card 1 year in.
Congresswoman Harman, as our foreign policy expert, I want to ask you specifically about that area, foreign policy, whether it is rolling back ISIS, whether it's dealing with rogue states like Iran and North Korea, whether it's dealing with the great powers, China and Russia. How do you think this president has done?
Well, mixed, but a lot of good. I don't disagree with any of this. Let's remember, he was elected by Democrats and Republicans who were frustrated with Washington. Washington isn't getting better, including his role as a uniting president. He gave an inaugural speech a year ago, which could have been united the country. It didn't. He picked an issue, rolling back Obamacare, which divided the country. He should have picked infrastructure. He would have had a record twice as big as the one he now has. And on foreign policy, he's alienated a lot of our allies. He's embraced a lot of dictators around the world. He's about to go to the globalist swamp. That would be the Davos meeting this week.
Well, he may not because of the shutdown.
Well, he may not, but he is at least scheduled to go. That's another huge opportunity. How will he use that? On foreign policy, I give him some accomplishments. We are getting somewhere with North Korea. On Iran, Iran's bad behavior in the neighborhood deserves more sanctions. But blowing up the deal is pointless. I think I would give him the lowest marks on trade. I think jettisoning TPP created a huge market and opportunity for China in Asia. And China is our biggest competitor out there in the world. We're sort of working with them, but we have a lot of issues that are problematic. And I think our his foreign policy score would be better if his temperament were different, and if the language he uses weren't this coarsening language about demonizing immigrants from Africa, for an example.
Michael, your reaction, because you were the one who started all of this, both on substance and on, we call it style points, but behavior, conduct.
Yeah, I think there's no doubt that as a country we need to find ways to take a kind of civic coming apart that's going on. People who, on the one hand, feel like the Democrat Party is always against them, that they don't understand them or their values, and bring them together with Republicans or others who feel, obviously, the exact other way. I think sometimes the whole political system gets left off the hook a little bit for exacerbating some of these cultural problems. When Barack Obama passes a law that says that Catholic nuns are going to have to buy birth control, and when that goes all the way to the Supreme Court, and when one party is completely united around the idea of using the force of government to compel Catholic nuns to buy birth control, I don't think that's any more unifying than this president has been. And so certainly there are aspects of this president, his demeanor, his use of Twitter, that make many Americans look at Washington and feel disconnected, feel ashamed. I think that the left has to understand how so much of what they've been doing as they're on offense on the cultural wars, as they think that the tide of history is inextricably behind them, that makes many other Americans feel left out, feel persecuted, and cause them to show up and vote for Donald Trump as president.
Congresswoman?
So let's have a unifying president. He can still do this. He could start this week in Davos or here saying to this bipartisan group that's trying to reopen the government, okay, finally, I agree. Let's have votes on all these issues and put a package together that moves the country forward and makes Congress work again, and then I'll take credit for being the first president in this century that's made Congress work.
I think we're drawing a distinction between style and substance that is a little bit false here, because I think it's not just style when a president says something like he said after Charlottesville, where he drew a moral equivalence between the neo-Nazis and the people against them. And that has a substantive impact. There really is a problem in this country where many, many people don't just feel dissed by the president, but in some way actively threatened. And, you know, too bad if he thinks that's unfair or whatever. His job is to, and he's failed at it, to reach out to everyone and leave everyone feeling included.
Well, we're going to have to end on that somewhat negative point, but having said that, I was surprised with generally